Relying on reports in the news and publications, it seems likely that Biden and Trump represent different forms of power. Specifically, we believe that Biden's approach to power reflects collaborative power, whereas Trump's represents coercive power. Biden has a political career that dates back to 1970 and he has been elected and re-elected repeatedly. He has been a U.S. Senator for 36 years and Vice President for 8 years. He has participated in and chaired organizations such as the Senate's Judiciary Committee, and played a relevant role in laws such as the Violence Against Women Act. Thus, his behavior suggests a conviction that power is most appropriately exercised through legitimate institutions. Biden's professional resume is not the only indication of a collaborative theory of power. His personality and demeanor also provide evidence along these lines. Biographical sources and media reports portray Biden as a cooperative, conciliatory, and outgoing person, someone who emphasizes teamwork and wants to be liked by others, and wants to be seen as a friend or ally, which is consistent with traditional power reflecting collaboration and prestige. By contrast, Trump was an entertainer and businessman before he won his first political position, the U.S. presidency, in 2017. He presented himself as an outsider with anti-establishment, drain the swamp views. His rejection of institutions is reflected in withdrawing from international committees and using U.S. military capacities and resources without congressional approval. Before entering politics, he had a business career characterized by propensity to risk, corruption, and breaking the law. In short, Trump appears to embrace a coercive theory of power. Like Biden, Trump shows dispositional qualities consistent with this proposed orientation to power. He has been described as becoming angry easily, tending to provoke and confront others, and threatening political opponents to assert his position. Political psychologists have described Trump as dominant, unsentimental, intimidating, impulsive, controlling, and aggressive. Linking these accounts to the theories on power, his approach to power may be understood as the pursuit of naked and revolutionary power, and his search for that seems based in dominance. These two quotations represent statements made by the former and the present most powerful man in the world, Donald Trump and Joe Biden. As the quotations illustrate, the two presidents use different language styles. Whereas Biden emphasizes dignity, respect, and social responsibility, Trump uses derogation and celebrates egocentrism. The presidency offered each man power and social rank. Yet, the two men differ in the arguments they make and how they phrase them. We argue that this may reflect, in part, the different forms of power they value and project. We compared the linguistic features of written and spoken language by Trump and Biden, and tested whether the differences can be matched with different forms of power. Coercive and collaborative power are associated with distinct patterns of emotion, cognition, social orientation, and morality. Concepts of power are mirrored in written and spoken language and linked to the use of specific words, for example, more first-person plural pronouns. Moreover, different ways of using language can support power attainment, which is why different linguistic cues may be associated with different forms of power. Thus, coercive power attained through naked force and dominance should be characterized by different linguistic features than collaborative power based on legitimacy and prestige. We turn now to Donald Trump and Joe Biden, specifically, to develop our arguments for expecting these two candidates' speech to reflect the two proposed forms of power. Because of findings regarding the relation of self-reports concerning power and psychological states, we expected that language typical of collaborative power would use positive emotion words and refer to skills and achievements, social concerns, and moral values. By contrast, language typical of coercive power should have a less positive tone and words related to force should be present. To analyze Trump's and Biden's public communications, we selected specific multi-word variables as well as dictionaries representing collections of variables. Hypothesis 1, emotion words. In line with the differences between emotions associated with coercive and collaborative power, we expected Biden to use more positive emotion and fewer negative emotion words than Trump. Hypothesis 2, cognitive words. We have shown that language related to cognition and expertise is more characteristic of collaborative than coercive power. We predicted that Biden would use more of these words than would Trump. Hypothesis 3, achievement. Achievement motivation is more characteristic of collaborative than coercive power. We predicted that Biden would use more achievement words than Trump. Hypothesis 4, social words. As outlined earlier, collaborative power is characterized by valuing and maintaining good social relations, whereas coercive power is related to psychopathy and low communion. Accordingly, Biden was expected to use more social words than Trump. Hypothesis 5, moral words. Collaborative power, in contrast to coercive power, should be associated with care for others, fairness, authority, dignity, and a focus on the in-group. By contrast, coercive power is theoretically linked with harm, cheating, violence, subversion and betrayal, whereas collaborative power is theoretically not or negatively linked with vices. Thus, we expected that Biden's language would be characterized by the virtue-related words consistent with collaborative power and Trump's by the vice-related words consistent with coercive power. Hypothesis 6, presidentiality. Because collaborative power, as we have argued, reflects continuity in institutions and systems, presidentiality should correspond positively with collaborative and negatively with coercive power. Thus, we expected words from the category presidentiality to be used more often by Biden than by Trump. Hypothesis 7, honest language. Because collaborative power is represented by openness and interpersonal trust and coercive power is linked to lying and deception, honest language should be associated with collaborative power. Therefore, we predicted that Biden would use honest language more than Trump. Biden's tweets on average were longer than Trump's. No large differences were found between positive or negative emotion words used by the two candidates, thus, Hypothesis 1 was rejected. Hypothesis 2 was supported. Biden's language was more cognitively complex and he more often referred to cognitive processes than Trump did, although Trump's language was characterized by more words related to analytical thinking. Further, consistent with Hypothesis 3, Biden used more achievement words than did Trump. In line with Hypothesis 4, Biden used more social process and affiliation words than Trump, and this is what we would expect from a collaborative power leader. For Hypothesis 5, with respect to morality, variables showed the expected differences. The largest hypothesis-confirming differences pertain to harm virtue and in-group virtue, both linguistic variables that were more often used by Biden. Consistent with Hypothesis 6, Biden used more words than Trump with respect to presidentiality. Finally, Biden's language was characterized by more honesty than Trump's. Thus, Hypothesis 7 was supported. Results of the context analysis for tweets were partly in line with our hypothesizing. For example, in Biden's tweets the words that co-occurred with his own name were related to trustworthiness, achievements, and social processes. By contrast, the words that co-occurred with Biden's name in Trump's tweets were negative and hostile, as is typical in dominance. Trump tended to self-praise in his tweets, but also to pair his own name with words that may be related to revolutionary power, for example, derangement. Trump spoke on average 5,556 words, and Biden 2,049, per speech. Hypothesis 1 predicted that Biden would use more positive and fewer negative emotion words than Trump. Contrary to the prediction, Trump used more positive emotion words and virtually no difference was found between the candidates in the use of negative emotion words. Though Hypothesis 1 called for differences in the use of positive and negative emotion words, barely any difference was observed between the candidates. In line with Hypothesis 2, Biden's language was characterized by more words related to analytical thinking. The candidates barely differed in their use of words related to cognitive processes, and Trump's language was more cognitively complex than Biden's. Thus, results for Hypothesis 2 were mixed. However, in line with Hypothesis 3, Biden used more achievement-related words than Trump did, and this is what we would expect from a leader who celebrates collaborative power. The results for the social variables did not yield a clear picture. Contrary to Hypothesis 4, Trump used descriptively more words related to social processes and affiliation, but the effect sizes were below the threshold of practical significance. Hypothesis 5 specified that Biden would more often rely on virtue words than Trump, who would rely more on vice-related words. Hypothesis 6 was supported. Biden's language was characterized by more words related to presidentiality than Trump's. This difference indicates that Biden's language is comparable to that of past presidents, and this is typical of the language of a leader who relies on collaborative power. Hypothesis 7 proposed that Biden's language would be characterized by honesty to a larger degree than Trump's language. Yet, Trump's language was actually more related to honesty. These characteristics, like truthful language, positive tone, using social words, may reflect advice from campaign managers or scripted speeches. Furthermore, even though fact-checking has often pointed out that Trump's arguments do not hold and many liberals accuse him of being dishonest, millions of people see him as a real, truth-teller. Perhaps one reason for that is that he, and/or his advisors, knows how to prepare speeches in ways that signal truth-telling, consistent with his reality TV experience and with other examples of his success in inverting consensus meaning. Another possibility is that Trump feels authentic despite his lies, because his statements reflect his own, if not others', view of reality or, to quote George Costanza, "It's not a lie if you believe it." Deceptive language is characterized by low cognitive complexity because lying requires cognitive resources. Furthermore, lying often produces guilt that is reflected in using more negative emotion words. Finally, liars less often than others use first-person pronouns, and the low usage of these pronouns has been associated with discomfort. Trump was repeatedly reported to be dishonest and prevaricate, but the analysis indicates that his language is authentic. A possible interpretation is that he feels neither guilt nor discomfort when lying, identifies strongly with what he is saying, and does not worry whether his speeches are consistent. This reasoning would be in line with the assumption that he does not experience increased cognitive load and thus would be able to tell relatively complex stories. The exploratory results of the context analysis for speeches support our hypothesizing because, in referring to his own name, Biden also refers to credibility and presidentiality terms that represent traditional power. When speaking about Trump, Biden often linked the name to dominance-related words. This raises the intriguing possibility that Biden had some degree of awareness of the difference between his and Trump's approaches to power, and perhaps a desire to highlight that difference. Trump, on the other hand, often used negative words in combination with Biden's name, which is typical of a leader high in dominance. The words that Trump used in co-occurrence with his own name are representative of a high-power motive coupled with derogation of competitors. Credibility and presidentiality did not seem to be central. In any case, the interpretation of the results from the context analysis is highly exploratory and should be treated cautiously. Nevertheless, we consider it remarkable to find patterns that resemble the previously identified patterns in linguistic word count on the basis of mere associations with automatic language processing. Supposing Trump and Biden might run for president in 2024, it remains to be shown whether they use the same distinct language styles as they did in their 2020 election battle. Further, as our language analysis provides initial support for viewing Trump as leader who relies on coercive power and Biden as one who relies on collaborative power, we may speculate about voters' preferences. For example, dominant leaders are favored over prestige leaders in situations of economic uncertainty like high poverty and unemployment rate, and thus people in difficult economic circumstances may prefer a candidate who shows dominance. Should the U.S. economy be in poor shape during the 2024 campaign, this might privilege Trump. On the other hand, U.S. Democrats strive to build a coalition that includes and respects people from diverse demographic, geographic, and political backgrounds. A more collaborative and inclusive style is appropriate for leading in these circumstances, giving Biden some advantage. In short, prevailing circumstances that heighten the perceived value of coercive versus collaborative leadership will likely determine which candidate's approach to power will succeed.